We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect their spiritual relationship to the land. We hope to learn from them how we can live together in peace and justice.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as visionless, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Good morning. Good sunny Sunday morning. Thank you, Rich, for that wonderful stroll down memory lane. Welcome, everyone, to this Sunday morning service of the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. My name is Abby Sessions, and I'm a member of this congregation. This morning, I serve as worship associate for a service led by Ann Bachma, a guest who is with us through the magic of Zoom from Ontario, Canada today. Ann is the author of the book, My Year of Living Spiritually. And today she will share insights from her whirlwind year of experimenting with a variety of spiritual practices. Whether you come every Sunday, occasionally, or with us for the very first time, we are delighted to see you here at CVUUS. If this is your first time attending a service with us, please email us so that we can share more about who we are, what we do, and learn more about you. If you have a milestone or passage to share, put it in the chat if you have not already sent it in. Our weekly Zoom coffee hour will happen immediately after the service. This week, we offer a special breakout room for a free workshop on planned giving strategies. Our guest advisor is Jason Cadwell, a money management expert based in Burlington. If you're on Zoom, just stay put and Jordan will make the arrangements. If you're on YouTube, switch over to Zoom and join us for a coffee hour, and Ann will be available for a chat about her service. There are many ways for us to connect with one another in addition to Sunday services. The best way to stay in touch with the many activities going on is through the weekly email blast sent out on Wednesdays by Laura Sermily, our office manager. Here are a couple of highlights. Jean Terwilliger and Mike Greenwood will lead a group reading of this year's UUA Common Read, Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. This will happen on the fourth Wednesdays of the month at 7 p.m., starting next Wednesday, January 27th and going on through April. Reverend Barnaby is leading an adult Zoom class on prayer the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, January, February, and March. The class meets for an hour and 50 minutes. We'll next meet on January, I don't know, whatever the fourth Thursday is. There's still room for you to join. A couple of announcements. If you have upgraded to a new laptop and are deciding what to do with the old one, consider donating it to CVUUS Music Ministry. We've purchased some equipment to better record live music, and the missing piece is a dedicated laptop. Could be yours. Thanks for considering it. And second, if you have admired Bernie's mittens and would like a pair of your own, Jen Ellis, who made Bernie's now famous mittens, has made 2 additional pairs, and she's donated one to Outright Vermont, one of our past monthly donees. If you're interested in rockin' Bernie's fashion, go to the website getberniesmittens.com and you can try your luck at bidding on a pair. You must wear them to church if you get them. Our call to worship today is a poem by William Stafford, The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change. But it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt and die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. Now we will light our chalice. I invite you to join in saying the words on your screen. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and give back.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ooh, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ooh. Oh, building up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Hey everyone, my beautiful shiny people. Some of you may not be always feeling so shiny, but that's okay. The spark that is within you is always there, even if the shine is small at times. So I have a story to share today that is about someone who I would say is kind of trying to figure out something about their spark, which is really what our spiritual path is, right? Trying to feel a connection to ourselves and to others and to something bigger than us, which I like to think of as kind of our spark and what it connects to. So let's get this up. So this is a story called Carl and the Meaning of Life by Deborah Freeman. Carl was not a bird. Carl was not a bear or a beaver. Carl was an earthworm. He lived underground, moving, always moving, burrowing, tunneling, digesting dead leaves, feasting and casting, turning hard dirt into fluffy soil day after day. Why? Asked a field mouse, gathering seeds. Why do you do that? Why? Carl didn't know why, but now he needed to find out. So Carl stopped making fluffy soil. I'll be right back, he told the field mouse. He spotted a rabbit. Maybe she knew. Why do I do what I do? He asked her. Oh, goodness, dear, she said. I do not know. I do what I do for my babies. But Carl did not have babies. A fox appeared. Carl turned to the fox. Why do I do what I do? Asked Carl. Who do I do it for? For whom? Replied the fox. Alas, my meal awaits. I'm here for the hunt. But Carl did not want to hunt. Why are you talking to a fox? Cried a squirrel. Carl was startled. Because the field mouse is waiting and wants to know what I am here for. The squirrel declared, I'm here to plant trees. Trees are where I sleep. But Carl could not sleep, not high in a tree, and not without an answer for the mouse. He pushed on. What? And on. Hours turned into days until the soil was no longer fluffy. Who? The ground around Carl turned barren and dry while he continued to search. Why? But the birds had flown off to find grasses and fluff. The bear trundled away to look for berries. Soon there was nobody left to talk to. What about me? Called Carl. The clouds were silent. So was the air. I will never find out, he sniffled. Then Carl heard his sniffle echo, followed by a squeak. I can't find any grubs, a voice cried. It was the saddest ground beetle he had ever seen. Carl peeked under a stone. No grubs. Then he poked at the dirt. It was hard like rock. Where was his fluffy soil? Suddenly Carl knew what he had to do. I'll be back, he promised. For hours into days, weeks into months, Carl munched, digested, left castings, and tunneled, and turned that hard dirt back into rich soil. "You made my seeds grow," said the mouse. Clover blossomed once again, and the rabbit came back with her kits. The squirrel returned to plant new trees. The fox was lured by the hunt, all of them able to do what they do. How? Well, why not ask Carl? So, here's what I want to leave you all with this week. What is our spark about? How does our spark connect to other people? And what does it do for the world to have that? And the specific thing I'll leave you with is this week, I invite you to try to just notice one thing. It can be tiny. One little thing that you do this week that makes somebody's life possible or more joyful, or even just a way that you're connected in some way and keep something turning or going or moving. I mean, all of you do that at CVUUS, right? That's why we come together in community. So, my beloveds, for the kids and parents, I miss you. I love you. And that's it.
Okay, Poppy, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Now is the time for our offering, when we share our wealth with some organization that is working to represent our values and principles in the larger world. This month, our donee is 350.org, an organization founded right here in Middlebury, actively fighting climate change around the world. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. In this silent space for meditation and prayer, it's a time for you to be in touch with what's on your heart and mind today.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faith, our quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why. In our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high. Spirits joining as we fly, to touch the earth, to reach the sky.
Our reading today is number 657 from our gray hymnal, It Matters What We Believe, by Sophia Lyon-Fahs. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness, the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like a body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like a young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. And now Anne Bachma.
Hi, everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having me. Folks in Vermont and folks in Canada have a few things in common, so I definitely feel I am among my people here. I am a Unitarian in Hamilton, Ontario, which is between Toronto and Niagara Falls. And as I say, very happy to be here with you today to talk to you about my book, My Year of Living Spiritually, One Woman's Secular Quest for a More Soulful Life. If you'd like more information on that, I've put my website in the chat box. I do a monthly newsletter. I also want to just let you know that I also run a storytelling event in Hamilton, which is a charitable event for my church as well as a local charity. And that's happening on February 12th with 12 speakers on the theme of Turning Point. It's a wonderful event. If you want to tune into that, you can find out more at my website. So in 2017, I decided to devote myself to being more devotional. And I spent 12 months engaged in 24 different spiritual practices. 2 books were the inspiration for my experimental year. One was A.J. Jacobs' The Year of Living Biblically. Perhaps some of you have read that book. It's a wonderful read in which the author attempts to follow all 700 arcane laws of the Old Testament. He tithes 10% of his salary. He doesn't shave his beard. He was fruitful and multiplied and had twins that year. He even carried a portable stool around with him on the New York subway system as a way to follow the biblical edict to not sit in any place where a menstruating woman has sat. I was also inspired by Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project, during which she spends a year road testing every theory about happiness that she can get her hands on, from getting better sleep to singing in the morning to reading Aristotle and cleaning out her closets. For my spiritual year, I engaged in a host of practices that might be described as anywhere from New Age to pagan, mystical, transcendental, even supernatural. So what did I do? Everything from goat yoga to singing in choirs. I went on a pilgrimage to swim in Henry David Thoreau's iconic Walden Pond. I meditated, tried forest therapy, had Reiki with several different practitioners. I went to the Women's March on Washington. I created a home altar complete with crystals and essential oils. I gave up booze for the 40 days of my own sort of secular Lent. I worked with a soul coach on how to create daily practices that would bring more intention to my life. I went to a week-long witch camp at a Unitarian campground. I Marie Kondoed my home and got rid of about a third of my possessions, learned to read tarot. I embraced solitude by living in a remote treehouse for a few days. I even tried magic mushrooms for the first time, and I can tell you it was quite the trip. Every day I wrote down things that I was thankful for, and I got a tattoo. So it was a whirlwind year. Why did I do all this? Well, I have to say I partly have Donald Trump to thank. Of course, that year started with the election of this scary new man in the White House. And like many of you, I despaired about what this meant for the world. And I thought that cultivating a deeper spiritual life might help in facing the coming days with a greater sense of resolve instead of hopeless defeat. But there was another reason. I had turned 56 that year, and midlife was hitting with a wallop. My kids were off to university, and I was facing the prospect of the looming empty nest. There were challenges in my 30-year marriage, and I was still experiencing the pangs of alienation from my family due to our religious differences. Years earlier, I had left the strict fundamentalist Canadian Reformed Church I was raised in, and my family had never really forgiven me. Life was shifting in other ways as well. I had attended 4 funerals services in the previous year and no weddings. Funny how that starts to happen at a certain stage in life. I knew there were now far more days behind me than ahead of me. And I wanted to make those days more meaningful. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives, says the writer Annie Dillard. Like many of you, perhaps, I wondered and worried about how the last part of my life was going to unfold. And in midlife and older life, we're told to worry more about our sagging skin than our flagging spirit. We spend a lot of time, or at least we're encouraged to spend a lot of time and money and effort on the exterior of our life, how we dress, our bodies, our homes, what kind of car we drive, how well our kids are doing. But how much attention are we encouraged to give to our spirit? How much do we nourish the inner sanctuary of our being? I would argue it's in midlife when we become more reflective, we understand what really matters, we've experienced loss and struggle, and we're getting closer to the end of our lives. It's a time when we may feel a certain restlessness or a sense of urgency about tending to our spiritual selves. Theologian Beverly Lanzetta says that, quote, our contemplative nature lives in protest to the complexities of life, while beneath society's competing attractions, the longing for the holy erupts in our souls. And the great poet Mary Oliver wrote that attention is the beginning of devotion. I wanted to stop and really pay attention to my life. So I set out on my own sort of eat, pray, love experiment, a kind of do-it-yourself path to enlightenment. Except unlike author Elizabeth Gilbert, who I greatly admire, I didn't have thousands of dollars to, book a flight to Bali and meditate on a mountaintop. Instead, I experimented with all these spiritual practices, most right in my own backyard. They were doable, affordable, and accessible. One of the personal habits that I wanted to address was an addiction to being busy. If I wasn't being productive, I felt my life had little value. My version of the 10 Commandments was my to-do list. I'm going to read a little section about that now from chapter 1 of my book called Waking Up, in which I attempt to make some changes to some of the habits that were standing in the way of living a more satisfying life. Self-sacrifice often goes hand in hand with overwork. Women in particular are raised on the notion that good people take care of others first. We wait until everyone else has a full plate and then we take the leftovers. It's challenging to tend to our spiritual selves when our lives are full of multitasking, duties, and obligations. We can put ourselves in the back burner and become people who simply do things instead of people who experience them. And when we do put ourselves first, we often feel guilty. Women are their own worst enemies, says the writer Erica Jong, and guilt is our main weapon of self-torture. Show me a woman who doesn't feel guilty, and I'll show you a man. The trouble with believing your life has value only if you're productive is that you can never sit still. My husband can spend an entire Saturday afternoon on the couch, napping, playing guitar, and doing puzzles. I admire this ability of his, I do, but I have to admit sometimes it makes me angry. Doesn't he see everything that needs to get done? What my daughters have witnessed is a mother in constant motion. What kind of example have I set for them? Will they grow into women who do too much? Women who take care of everyone else and neglect themselves? Will they think their lives don't have meaning unless they're accomplishing some task or another? I didn't pass religion on to my kids, but I do exemplify a go-go gospel. There's a very good chance they've inherited the Calvinist notion of salvation through productivity from me. There are a lot of people like me who complain about how busy they are. The idea of adding spiritual practices to already jam-packed days can seem oppressive. Who's got time to meditate or read or join a singing group or go for a midday walk in the woods, no matter how enriching it might be? Yet the average woman spends 5 years of her life shopping and 30 hours a week doing housework. Maybe we owe ourselves a break. Maybe we need to lower our standards. Better yet, we can insist our partners and kids do their fair share. Until recently, I did all the laundry for everyone in the house. Washing, drying, folding, sorting, and hauling were pretty much a daily occurrence. No one made me do it. I'd just taken it on. And then one frustrating day, while trying to sort socks whose matches seemed to have been swallowed up by the dryer, I did some calculations and figured out I'd spent almost a year of my adult life preoccupied with this stuff. Then and there, I stopped doing everyone else's laundry. There was barely a squawk of protest from anyone in my family. They stepped up and did their own. What had taken me so long? Now I'm looking for more ways to claim back precious hours. By far the biggest time drain for North Americans is how we entertain ourselves. On average, we spend 8.5 hours, yes, 8.5 hours, the majority of our waking time, consuming media on our tablets, smartphones, personal computers, video games, DVRs, and TVs. Do the math and you'll see where all of our free time is going. More than 70% of us sleep with or next to our phones. I've been as guilty as anyone. My phone had become my Bible, the thing I clasped in my hands as if it held all the wisdom of the universe. Similarly, Netflix had become my church. I regularly worshiped from the comfortable pew of my couch. I easily gave in to the lure of a new TV series, a cliffhanger podcast, the perennial ping of text notifications. I didn't daydream anymore, not at the waiting room at the doctor's office or standing in line at the grocery store. I wasn't leaving any openings for spacious boredom. All this digital consumption, I've come to see, put me in danger of never being fully present in my life. It also put me at risk of losing one of life's greatest pleasures, reading books. That formerly steadfast attachment had been replaced by more superficial attractions. Books could no longer compete with the slender and alluring piece of technology I cupped in my hand as tenderly as a lover's face. Another reason I wanted to embark on this adventure and write a book about it is that I hoped it might help people like me who felt trapped in fundamentalist religions and saw no way out. As I mentioned earlier, my relationship with my mother and other family members unraveled when I was 20 and I left the strict Calvinist church that I grew up in. We went to church twice on Sundays, prayed before every meal, read the Bible after, attended catechism on Wednesdays, young people's on Fridays, and I went to private Christian schools. Church life was the center of existence for my fundamentalist Christian family, an insular place that protected me from outside worldly influences like evolution and dancing. And I'm one of those people, and there are millions of us former fundamentalists who were raised with the notion that we were born wretched sinners, never quite good enough just the way we were. I was indoctrinated with the idea of the devil, hell, Armageddon, a great end times event. I was not raised to have faith in the essential goodness of human nature, but was taught the concept, the Calvinist concept called total depravity, that as a consequence of Eve eating the apple in the Garden of Eden, every single person is enslaved to sin. Guilt was a unifying thing of my religious life. As a Jewish American comedian Kathy Landman says, all religions are the same, guilt but with different holidays. When I left the fundamentalist church of my youth, I was threatened with excommunication, and my family, because of how they'd been indoctrinated, believed I was going to hell. When I lost my faith, I essentially lost my family. After leaving the Canadian Reformed Church, I went on to have a brief flirtation with the Presbyterians, a decade-long love affair with the United Church, or the Church of Christ as it's known in the US. And I finally settled into a committed relationship with the Unitarians about 15 years ago. So fearful was I of my parents' reaction to me becoming a Unitarian that I kept it from them for about a year. And actually, it was my then 8-year-old daughter who innocently blurted out the news to my parents. "We're Unitarian now," she said, "and we never talk about Jesus." You can imagine how that went over. Becoming a Unitarian led to a decade-long estrangement from my family. I finally found my spiritual home among the Unitarians, and I continue to be grateful for this and wanted to show in my book that with the right support, it is possible to get out of oppressive religions and find something better. It's often painful because you might lose the connection to some of your loved ones in the process, but you stand to gain so much: the right to create your own belief system, the right to a more authentic life, the right to be part of a community that embraces you, doubts and all. Everyone's spiritual journey is unique to them, and we should all be free to discover and develop it on our own and not be coerced into belief. There are many like me who have left traditional religion. Only 1 in 5 Canadians goes to church anymore, and about 80 million North Americans consider themselves spiritual but not religious. But being SBNR, as it's known, is not a new idea at all. The transcendentalists of the mid-1800s were the first to consider themselves spiritual but not religious. Led by the great philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, they believe spiritual truth is known intuitively rather than learned through institutions. They believe we are born good, not sinful. They believe God was in nature rather than the church. Instead of relying on biblical authority, they relied on themselves. Make your own Bible, Emerson urged. Sometimes we're suspicious about talking about spirituality, and it can make us uncomfortable, but it's definitely a conversation worth having. The great spiritual writer Thomas More says the big problem of our time is loss of soul. And I think this is evident in the high rates of depression and loneliness that we see. About 40% of people say they're chronically lonely, and I think those numbers are higher now during COVID. I think many of us are suffering from a spiritual hunger of the soul. I know I wanted to look at ways to satisfy that hunger. As I approached my year of living spiritually, I combined a seeker's enthusiasm with a reporter's skepticism to the experiences that I engaged in. Some of the things I did during my year are often described, as sort of woo-woo, like using crystals or having your chakras balanced or doing a past life regression session. I think a lot of people use this term in a dismissive way to make fun of the whole notion of being spiritual but not religious. And I think these sorts of practices are often dismissed because it's usually women who engage in them. It's a form of sexism, really. Billions of people believe in ideas such as the existence of an unproven God or a holy Virgin Mother. That's not considered woo-woo, but perfectly normal. But as soon as we consider alternative practices like Reiki or crystals or forest therapy or reading tarot or pagans dancing under a full moon, they're dismissed as frivolous. And yet these practices, many of which can be deeply meaningful and have a long history, are predominantly followed by women. And I wanted to challenge the notion that they are simply woo-woo. During my year of spiritual exploration, I was inspired by these words from Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who said, "Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. And although I might not have realized it at the start of my year, that's exactly what I was searching for: amazement, a rekindled feeling of wonder and a sense of meaning in the world that sometimes seems to have gone rather mad. These days, it's far more tempting to be cynical rather than spiritual, especially when the political leadership of the free world seems intent on destroying the planet and marginalizing the oppressed and glorifying greed. But maybe one way to fight against this inevitable disillusionment, disappointment, and despair that this can cause is to cultivate a more spiritual life, to tend to that inner sanctuary of our being. And maybe this can help us create a deeper reservoir to draw on from when our souls feel parched. And this in turn can serve to amplify a more determined outer life so that we can be of better service in the world, which is really what it's all about. So did I end up a more spiritual person at the end of my year? Well, I always say you have to read my book to find out. But I will tell you this: I changed some things in my life. I watch watch a lot less Netflix, and I drink less wine. I read more books. I'm more thankful. I learned to be content with my own company, something that has certainly helped during COVID. This year offered answers about how to live more attentively and authentically in the world. It made me consider what it means to be a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a good person. And it also resulted in some significant changes in a couple of major relationships in my life. It meant forgiveness, not just of others, but of myself. I made peace with the past, and I think I changed the course of my future. The writer Polly Barron says, "Everything that happens to you is your teacher. The secret is to learn to sit at the feet of your own life and be taught by it." In the end, I realized that religion almost wrecked me, but spirituality saved me, and I found my way again. I found my way through practice, because spiritual practices are just that: practices that are dedicated daily or weekly or monthly or even annual routines that you devote yourself to in the hope of having a life with more connection, meaning, community, peace, and contentment. Emily Dickinson said, "The soul should always stand ajar, ready to welcome the ecstatic experience." I'm glad I pushed open that door, and I invite you to walk through it with me, because who knows what you might find on the other side. I'm going to finish now with a reading from a chapter that I wrote. My book is divided into months, and each month looks at a different spiritual practice. And this is from a chapter on music, in which I joined a couple community choirs. I had my first professional voice lesson. I went on a singcation retreat off the coast of Newfoundland. And I joined a threshold choir, singing to palliative and chronic care patients in a large Toronto hospital. So I'm just going to finish with a reading from that section. There isn't a threshold choir in Hamilton where I live, but in nearby Toronto, the Comfort Choir sings every Friday afternoon in the chronic care and palliative wards of a large hospital. It was founded 10 years ago by Suzanne Mazars, the musical director of a Toronto Unitarian congregation, with a mission to bring comfort, calm, spirit, and a soul connection to the bedsides of patients. I joined their group of 4 for an afternoon, donning a purple vest and toting a thick green binder with music and lyrics to everything from folk songs to hymns and pop tunes. Before we venture down the 5th floor hallway, we gather in a quiet room where we close our eyes for a few minutes to center ourselves in preparation. Let's remember, this may be the last song they hear, says Maritz. She will gently knock on the door of each room to check whether the patient or any visitors present would like us to sing. I have not been up close with death and suffering very often, and I'm not prepared for what I see. Several of the patients in the chronic care section are unconscious, kept alive by machines attached to their windpipes. The first woman is about my age. Her eyes are closed and her mouth hangs slack. She is missing several teeth, and as we gather around her bed, I can see from the outline of her form under the covers that she's also missing her legs from the knees down. A car accident, I wonder? Her blue hospital gown is thin, and I can see one breast is gone. Breast cancer? So many missing pieces. But the window ledge in her room is full. There are plants in bloom, cards and photos from another life. In one, she looks vibrant and carefree, standing on a tropical beach with what I assume is her grown son and a grandchild. There's a Mother's Day card addressed to a special mom. I naively hope for some slight movement in her face as we sing, but it doesn't come. I don't know what's happened to this woman, but I do know she's loved. As we enter the room of a patient who looks to be in her early 40s, her elderly mother is standing next to her bed. Yes, please sing, says the mother, and we launch into a short selection. The mother never stops touching her daughter, patting her shiny black hair, adjusting the cotton padding around her trach tube, lifting her hand to check if her daughter's already perfectly manicured fingernails need further trimming. When we finish our last song, the mother claps her hands and looks brightly over at her daughter, but there's no response. Afterward, I'll learn that the daughter has been in hospital for 7 years, non-responsive for the last few. At first, I wonder why the parents have kept her artificially alive, but then I imagine that this is one of my daughters, in a silent coma for years, her heart still beating, her fingernails still growing, still needing her mother still needing her. As we head back to the volunteer room to put our vests and songbooks away, we pass a large room with half a dozen elderly women in it, some in hospital beds and some bent over in wheelchairs. A young male orderly at one end of the room is holding an iPhone that's playing a tinny version of John Lennon's Imagine. He's singing to the women, a few of whom follow along in quavery voices. When the orderly sees us, he invites us to sing for the group. We oblige, and some patients from the hallway also maneuver into the room. Soon there are patients all around them. Some clap their hands, some know all the lyrics, a few continue sleeping. One woman in a wheelchair raises her bent head every once in a while, looks at us, and simply moans. Some of these women are barefoot. Some have brightly painted toenails, which I take as a hopeful sign. Their legs are thin and fragile, like the limbs of schoolgirls dangling from monkey bars. More women in wheelchairs are congregating in the hallway, jockeying like bumper cars now, following the call of our voices. We've practically got a concert going on here. A middle-aged woman comes into the room and goes over to the moaning woman in the wheelchair. She strokes her thin gray hair and whispers gently into her ear, which quiets her momentarily. There is certainly despair here among those who are confused and feeble and dying, but there is love too. Music soothes us at the beginning of life and comforts us at the end. It achieves the miraculous task of simultaneously expressing our suffering and offering solace. Our little choir moves into the hallway because the room is getting overcrowded, and as we line up against the wall, the moaning woman gestures to her daughter to move her wheelchair closer to us. As we sing, she begins to mouth the words slowly. In her confused and innocent face, I can imagine the young girl she once was, and also the old woman I'll become if I'm lucky enough to live another 30 years. All these mothers and daughters administering so tenderly to each other makes me think of my own mother and what it'll be like for her at the end, whether she'll want me to stroke her hair. I think of my daughters and how I hope they'll outlive me by decades, how I hope I can hold their hands when my time comes, how I hope there will be music to mark my ending. Maybe even this little light of mine, the song my mother once sang to me. That would be a comfort, I think, as my particular candle goes from a flame to a flicker and then is extinguished. If we're lucky, our lives begin with someone singing to us and end that way too. Thank you.
Spirit of light, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Whirling ahead, giving life the shape of justice. Roots holding clouds, wings set me free. Spirits of light, come to me, come to me.
Our closing words are from Maureen Killoran. No matter how weak or how frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong. Be connected. Each day act so you may be a little more whole.